before Pete went in for the surgery, he said, Amy, if I get to the other side of this, or when I get to the other side of this, I want to do something to help other people who get diagnosed with this.
Welcome to Flip Your Script, the podcast about life's critical turning points and how people find the inspiration and motivation to move forward and rewrite their unique stories. Flip Your Script is produced by Media Minefield, a public relations firm passionate about the power of sharing stories. Specializing in earned and social media, Media Minefield helps clients take control of their unique story and message. The show is hosted by Kristi Piehl, founder and CEO of Media Minefield, who flipped her script from an Emmy-winning journalist to a successful entrepreneur and speaker.
When Amy Johnson married, she knew her husband loved rock and roll, and she knew he was diagnosed with a heart murmur when he was just a teenager. What she didn't know was how those two facts would merge to change her life and cause a major Flip Your Script event for both her and her husband. Amy, welcome to the Flip Your Script podcast.
Thank you so much for having us. It's an honor to be here with you, Kristi.
I'm really excited about your story because you launched something to help other people because of your own personal experience. So let's start with your own personal experience. You get married to someone who you knew in the 80s. You both have this love for rock and roll, but you were more mature when you got married, and you had no idea that within still in your honeymoon period, really, just a couple of years of marriage, your life took this totally outside what you were expecting kind of turn. Tell me about that and the diagnosis and the medical stuff. Let's start there.
Okay, well, it was 5 years into our marriage because it was 2010 we got married. He found me on Facebook in 2009, and it didn't take us long. We got married. He moved from Fargo, and we started our life together. He bought drums. He hadn't played drums in a number of years, and got a gig and started playing his drums. So life's just rolling along, just swimmingly, and annual physical time comes up, and I was off doing something at a chamber meeting or some such thing. And Pete called me and he goes, there's something going on with my heart. They heard a murmur and they want me to get checked. So he had an appointment to go get an echocardiogram a couple days after that. And he got the call after they looked at the results. And I'll always remember this moment. It's stuck in my head when I heard Pete say an aortic aneurysm, a 5-centimeter aortic aneurysm, and aortic stenosis that's going to require surgery. So he's on the phone in the other office, and I've got my back-to-back office in the other room, and I'm Googling to look up these two terms. And
which is a huge mistake, right?
First mistake, yes. That feeling where everything starts to leave from your head down to your toes, and you just things start to go black, you're going to pass out. So he got off the phone, we took a deep breath, and we just kind of sat there for a while. And then Pete said, he goes, I can't wait 2 weeks for somebody to call me for an appointment. So he called the clinic and said, I need to get in and see Dr. Prasanna today. Can you get me in? So they got us an appointment within the next 2 hours. And probably one of those changing moments is before Dr. Prasanna even sat down in the room, he looked at Pete and he looked at me and he said, this is a good thing. We found it and it's all fixable. So he got out his notepad. He drew pictures. He showed us what it was, talked about what aortic stenosis was, what an aneurysm was, and how fortunate Pete was that we found it now, because his exact words were, this should not affect the quantity or the quality of your life, because we found it now.
And how old was Pete at this time?
Well, let's see. This was in 2015, so he was 52.
Still young.
Yes, very young.
For this type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we should just take a minute and tell people, go get your annual exams. Go to the doctor. These preventative types of well checks, you never know what you're going to find, and you can always deal with it if you find it. But if you don't find it, you can't deal with it, and it could be too late, which is exactly what happened for you two.
Yes, and the thing is, it was the heart murmur that was the indication that had been heard before. It had been heard when he's had DOT physicals for driving a bus and also when he was a teenager. But it was that they called it it's an innocent murmur was the word they used. So when somebody tells you innocent, what do you think? You think it's nothing. Everything's fine. You just kind of let that go. But it wasn't.
And no one
Innocent.
had ever said, you know what, someday this is going to be something significant. You had always heard this innocent, which is like a puppy or daffodils or something
Uh-huh.
that's like lovely that doesn't really negatively impact your life.
Right. And as it turns out, that innocent murmur was because he was born with a bicuspid aortic valve, which simply means it had two flaps instead of three. So there was an abnormal flow, and that just makes a funny sound that you can hear with a stethoscope.
So you wonder if he would have been a baby born now if they would have found that right away, as opposed to not just hearing the murmur. I mean, you'll never know, but you just
Right.
wonder if a doctor now would hear that, and we just have better stuff than we did when he was born.
Yeah.
So you get this, okay, it's going to be fine. He's not going to have a negative impact to his life, but it's going to require some significant treatment.
Yes. Yep. So, of course, that's just the initial diagnosis. And I always like to say that it was Dr. Bersani. He talked us off the ledge on, we'll call that day zero, diagnosis day zero. So he sat down and made an appointment with Pete to see a cardiologist who would look more and analyze and kind of get an idea surgery. Because, of course, now we're thinking open heart surgery. We were told open heart surgery. You don't know, can I walk? Can I run? Should I play drums? Are there things that I can't do? So his first cardiologist appointment didn't seem very serious. The guy's like, it's normal. We found it. We usually don't do anything till aneurysms are 5.5. Yours is only 5. But the one thing, this first appointment, he said, no, you don't need to worry about your relatives because it's a genetic defect. It's not hereditary. However, 6-month follow-up, new cardiologist said that is absolutely not the case. All of your first degree relatives should be tested because this absolutely can run in families, the bicuspid aortic valve and the aneurysm. So that kind of helped us when you start thinking about, wow, this conflicting information you're getting. You hear one thing, here 6 months later, you're hearing something different. That's when those initial thoughts start to come that this is something we wish we would have known about. We need to have more information. You feel lost, you're confused, you're getting different answers from different doctors, and all you want to do is live and know what's next. What's the next step? What should my family be doing? And we had a lot of questions.
It's a really good point because you're in a position, you live in a place where there's a lot of excellent medicine, physicians around, different options. You are educated to be your own advocate. You had the resources financially, insurance to go out there and find information. But even in something where the average person, I think, thinks science, there's one answer. There isn't. You got 2 different opinions from 2 different doctors. And if you went to 12 doctors, you could have gotten 12 opinions because at some point there are things that they just don't know.
Right. I don't know how many times I've told people that we've met across the nation how fortunate I feel to live in Minnesota, where we've got the best of the best of the best when it comes to, healthcare and especially heart issues. We've got so many phenomenal facilities here in the state. We're very lucky. It's not like this everywhere.
No, it isn't. And also people that live in extensive rural areas, they're hours and hours and hours away from healthcare. Even if they had access, still, it's not just, I'm going to go to get another opinion. It's an all day ordeal. So not everyone has the ability. So you're right. We are fortunate. So if we think about now, you just get this information and relatives can be impacted. Let's say that he didn't get the diagnosis and he lived his life without it ever being diagnosed, and all the first degree people never were told. What can happen if that goes undiagnosed?
What can happen if it goes undiagnosed is, there's a very recent public example with Richie Faulkner from Judas Priest, who actually had an aortic dissection while he was playing a guitar solo at a concert just a couple of weeks ago. And he was rushed in for an emergency 10-hour surgery to repair his aorta and replace his valve. And the recovery is a lot longer when it's not preemptive surgery, when the aorta which basically means the inner and the outer layers tear. So when that happens, the recovery can be a lot longer. And that, if it's not diagnosed very quickly, that leads to death. He will die.
And if he would have been behind the wheel of a car or sleeping alone or, not in a place where there were people that called 911. Also, the whole rock and roll vibe is coming through here, which is really lovely. So way to go, Amy, because it's fantastic. We get Judas Priest in already. Okay, so he has surgery. It goes well.
Yes. And the surgery was actually, there was a watch and wait for 2 years. With this, every 6 months being checked where you live on a roller coaster ride. So finally, it's 2 years after diagnosis, and we sit down and Dr. Campbell looks at Pete and he goes, Pete, we're at a point now where we think it's time. It's time. Pete goes, okay, I guess I better man up and get this done. Time to man up. So we got everything scheduled. He had his surgery in July 12th of 2017. And before Pete went in for the surgery, he looked at me and first he asked the doctor, what will you do if I get up and run? Can you give me some medication to kind of take the edge off? And they said yes. So he didn't run, but he said, Amy, he goes, if I get to the other side of this, or when I get to the other side of this, I want to do something to help other people who've get diagnosed with this, because we didn't know what it was. We'd never heard of it. It wasn't you hate to call it your typical heart disease, but it's different because it hides under the surface. And he really wanted to do something to help other people.
How widespread is this condition?
Probably more so than we think, because again, it goes asymptomatic. And in fact, we're talking to some medical professionals who have found that during COVID, with the increased number of CT scans that are being done, there's certain people that are looking at the aorta in those scans to see how many. And I'm not sure how long before those results are going to come out, but I think that you're going to find that there is a lot more prevalence of this condition than we know about. And also they think that there's probably a lot of people who died from what people just call a massive coronary. And if there was not an autopsy done, it's very possible that it was an issue with their valve or their aorta.
Are there other people, you mentioned a drummer for Judas Priest, other people who are household names who have had this condition?
Yeah, well, kind of the whole rock from the heart thing, how it came from the idea of being, Pete's band at the local VFW to a bigger concert at the Pantages Theater, was because one of our favorite bands, Night Ranger, their drummer went in for heart surgery. And while he didn't have the aneurysm, he had the undiagnosed bicuspid aortic valve, we found out. Kelly Kagi is the drummer. So he had a bicuspid aortic valve undiagnosed, actually misdiagnosed as asthma for a number of years when the valve started to tighten up. And he went in, same as Pete. He told us he went for a physical. They did a scan. They found the valve and wasn't asthma. So he had his aortic valve replaced a few months before Pete's surgery.
I'm sensing a drummer thing. Is there anything to do with too many drums, too loud, that just completely explodes the heart? I'm kidding. I know that's not true. Okay, so you get to the point where he's on the other side of it. He's recovered, and the last thing he said to you before he went in was, if I get to the other side, when I get to the other side, we're going to do something to help people. So how did you manifest that into something that is what it is today?
It was a dream. Like I said, it did initially start as an idea to do maybe something small locally. And then I just had the flash when I saw that Night Ranger was going to be in town. I looked at Pete. I said, why don't we just try to book Night Ranger? So we just started learning I've organized events before, but at the VFW or for the local chamber. So I just started doing a ton of research. We figured out how to get in contact with the bands. I found some local people who have some experience in these minor events to say, would you help me? Should we do this? And that was in December. And I remember it was right before Christmas vacation. I was sub-teaching that day, and we got the email back from Night Ranger's agent and made that first connection and started the process to actually make this dream to have a Rock from the Heart concert a reality.
So in your putting these events together, the goal is to raise awareness. So in this kind of situation where the heart issue is something that's often masked, how do you tell people and raise awareness that they should go have something done? What's your message?
The message is one of the hashtags, listen to your heart. We've partnered with an organization called Heart Valve Disease Awareness Day, and that's in February. And they've been a huge resource for us and a partner in these events, because their whole thing, they have these large collaboration efforts where you just reach out and try to educate the public. With Rock from the Heart, what makes us different is we're doing something that maybe a lot of the population who isn't thinking about their heart is, and bringing them in for a music event. And then when they look up the event online, they read the descriptions, they find it. We get emails every week from people that have seen the event and said, you know what, I was just diagnosed with this and I thought I was alone. And when we did our first event, it was going to be just a concert at first, but I was getting so many responses from people around the country when they heard about it who wanted to fly into the concert that we added a day at the beginning, and we actually have medical experts do a patient symposium focused on patient education to talk about the aortic disease and treatment methods and diagnosis and management and surgery. And the biggest part of that is the education is great, but it's that connection. When the people meet each other, they meet the doctors. The doctors have told us they learn as much from the patients and the caregivers and the families as we learn from them.
And you, as a wife, when we talk about flipping your script, you went from here we are living a very lovely life to caregiver, which you weren't expecting to do when your husband was that young, to event organizer, to advocate. What has motivated you to want to keep doing this work when I'm sure the hours are long and there are probably a lot of headaches and it's not like you're getting paid a lot of money to do this work. So what motivates you to keep doing this year after year?
Motivates me is when you see those people that make that connection who are diagnosed that didn't know about it. When you're able to reach out to somebody and have Pete talk to them one-on-one and talk them off the ledge. Just like Dr. Prasanna talked us off the ledge, now we're able to do that for other people. And using those words, telling them that this is a good thing. We found it and it's all fixable.
Because it is always fixable, is that true?
Majority of cases, when it is found in time and it's managed, it absolutely, yeah. Of course, nothing's ever 100%, but your chances of having something, go bad when you're being monitored are much, much less.
And your husband's life right now is normal, right?
It's normal. He drummed. He's so funny because before the surgery, of course, he videotaped himself drumming. And he brought that to his doctor appointment. He said, okay, when am I going to be able to do this again? He showed the doctors, when will I be able to do this? So he was actually doing some practice drumming at 4 weeks and 6 weeks and played his first paid gig 8 weeks after his open heart surgery.
Wow. What's your goal for the Rock from the Heart event?
The goal from the Rock from the Heart is to reach more people. We think that we've got a really unique model. Nobody else is mixing rock and roll with heart health education. And I want to take this 2-day model to other areas of the United States. So we've been in Minneapolis. We did 2 live events. Last year, we pivoted and we did a virtual event only because of the pandemic. So we brought in speakers for a longer period of time and did that virtually. For 2022, we've added a second event in Fargo, North Dakota. So we'll be doing Minneapolis, Fargo first, and then Minneapolis 2 weeks later. And Kristi, I've got a kind of a dream to hit Washington, D.C. next.
Why D.C.?
There's a lot of good organizations out there, and we've got some partner organizations which is key for something like this, to say, hey, we've got some great doctors and some great facilities here. Can you bring Rock from the Heart here? So that would be an option one. Cleveland, Ohio is also on the radar. Florida.
Because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes. Look at me with my Ohio geography. Yes. My son was born there and I lived there for a few years in Southern Ohio. So Still got it. So who's your dream headliner?
Judas Priest.
I mean, considering what happened, that feels like
Yep.
not that far outside the realm of possibility.
We'd also like Cheap Trick. Their bass player just recently had a heart surgery as well. And if we really wanted to shoot for the stars, let's go for the Rolling Stones, because Mick Jagger had a TAVR where he got a new aortic valve that they actually went in non-invasively. And he put up videos of him dancing just shortly after he got his new aortic valve.
And when you're doing these events, you're raising money, and the money is going to fund what?
The concert funds the education event because it's our goal. Number one, a lot of charities do galas, and I've always been that scraping by single mom, raising the family, so I do everything on a budget. I was raised by a single mom. I was a single mom before Pete found me again. So the goal is really to keep even the concert affordable. We don't want to have to charge, $700 for a ticket. We don't want to have to get, huge donors. So we get some grants or sponsors so that the concert funds the education and the survivor dinner that we do on Friday. Everybody can go.
If you get Mick Jagger, you're going to have to figure out what else to do with the money.
Yeah.
You get a lot of people to come.
And so then it just goes on with, long-term goals would be to produce. This whole COVID thing has taught us how important this virtual world is in reaching out to build kind of an education network where we can have speakers and do some educational videos and make that more accessible to people, whether it's by, computers, phones, apps, to be able to have that information out there readily accessible, especially to help people once they're diagnosed, to have a pool of resources there at the ready that we can refer people to and build that network.
And Amy, you said it before, you're a single mom, you scraped by, you have a lot of grit, you've been in the business community, you've done different things, and you have to, because your children need to eat 3 times a day, which continues. It'd be so much easier if it was just like once or twice a day, but no, those little people have to eat 3 times a day. And every parent will commiserate about that fact because it feels like you just feed them and they're hungry again. And they're expensive. So you raise your kids by yourself and you hustled to get financial resources and to continue to grow as a human being. Then you meet your husband, you go through this. Did you ever think, man, what am I doing? Starting an event thing and bringing in these named bands? Because I think there's a lot of people with a dream who think, boy, I don't have what it takes. I'm not wired to do this. I don't even know where to start. Well, how do you shut those voices down if they've ever come into your head?
And of course they do. You're like, what am I doing? I really try to look forward and not think about what could go wrong. But when I look forward, I'll say, okay, my goal is to have Night Ranger. My goal is to have all this stuff paid for. So it's not, oh my gosh, how are we going to pay for all this? But it's you figure out what that end goal is, and you just continually push and build and take those small steps towards that goal, and really turning those voices off. There's been days when I've looked and go, what am I doing? Are we going to be able to do this? Are we going to go, where am I going to find the money for this? Where am I going to find the support? But you take a deep breath and look towards that finish line. And it sure gets easier after having 2 under your belt. But that first one, boy, there were some days that I did have that doubt. But you got to keep pushing and able to take no. When you get those first grants where they turn you down, say, thank you, what a great idea, but we're not going to give you any money. You just got to shake that off. You can't dwell on that. You just have to take that grant application, rewrite it, listen to the feedback that they give you. Be sure to ask, of course, what could we do better next time, and be willing to take that constructive criticism to do better the next time is huge. And I also write as a freelance journalist, so being able to take that constructive criticism is kind of part of the deal.
You're right. A lot of no's in journalism.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in thinking about like even having a board, how did you know how to navigate that?
I've been on several other committees. I was president of our local chamber for a few years, so I had some board experience there. I'm on the local Delano Arts Council as well. So I had, some idea of what that would look like. And then I just tried to, find a few people that I knew would be connected to the cause, that were go-getters, that knew something about event planning, and were Night Ranger and music fans that might see this vision and help us achieve our goals.
I just love how from the first time you talked about this, with me several years ago when it was just starting, what I've always loved about it is how you took a passion, which comes very naturally to you and to Pete, the music, and connected it to a mission that has impacted your life, and then put two things that hadn't been put together really before, not in this way, together, and then rallied people around. And I think that's so often, whether it's we're talking about, and people who listen to this podcast have heard it before, whether you're talking about what your career should be or what your next adventure should be, but like go back and think about what is it that you get passionate about? What is it that motivates you and the mission? And together, even if it's never been done before, doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It just means no one else had that idea before. No one else had the drive for such a time as this. We're the, if not us, who? And that's what you have been doing since the very beginning, which I commend you for.
Yeah. And it's fun when you can help people and make a difference and have fun and wake up every morning and love what you do. When you get that email that grant that you applied for was approved, and you can dance around the house and go, I did that. Just me sitting here learning as I go, not being afraid to take on new challenges. And then when you get that one approval letter, it's like, wow. We got the Minnesota Vikings to sponsor us 2 years in a row. That's huge for me. Huge.
Oh, that is, especially when pre-Pete surgery, you didn't have a connection to the Minnesota Vikings. You're not someone who knew the right person to call. You just figured it out, right?
Yeah. And I've always told people, when I went into my job, I can't stand selling. I'm I can't sell my way out of a paper bag. But when I'm passionate about something, I would hope that shows through. And I think that's a part of the success, is because I found that passion. It was something that I really believed in. I love music, being a rock fan, and then going through an experience like that. And instead of letting it, change your life in a negative way, to take that pain, to take that fear, and to turn it into something to help and make the world a better place. And help, even if you help just one person get through their surgery, it was worth it. All the work was worth it.
So you're doing this as a volunteer, as a passionate wife. Is this your legacy? Is this what you want to be going 30, 40, 50, 100 years from now, this event, this message? Or do you think that if I do my job well, everyone will know about it? It won't even need an event anymore because every doctor will be educated, patients will be educated. Or is this something that we're going to have to be thinking about consciously because it just gets forgotten?
I think it's that we're going to have to continue to think about, because even once the awareness is there, it doesn't take away the fear once you're diagnosed and you've got that surgery looming, or when you're wondering if your children might be affected, or, during these watch and wait years after you've diagnosed, you might have 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years before there's surgery. So there's so much uncertainty. So all these support mechanisms that we have in connecting these survivors, caregivers, people on, the both ends of the surgery, people who are in that watch and wait year, people who are post-surgery, people who are caregivers, and sadly, people who have lost someone. Those human connections are what really helps people get through on that journey from diagnosis to recovery.
Because even the stats, they're numbers, but when you meet the people, and you said it before, if you can just help one, you see the one person, you see the one family, you see the one physician who learned something new from a patient, and that success.
Yeah, I know Pete's cardiologist said he didn't know we were living our life in 6-month chunks during the 2 years of watch and wait. You're on that roller coaster in between appointments, about that halfway point, you're riding high, but as that checkup looms closer, you start wondering, can I plan anything for 6 months down the road? And he said he was going to change his approach to talking to patients because we told him about that roller coaster ride. He goes, I didn't even think about that. I'm going to now.
And you'll never know how many people you've helped with the work you've done, with the physicians you've touched, with the different just advocacy programs. So I hope that those emails continue to fuel you on the days when you get a lot of no's.
Yeah, that's the hope. Keep human connection, especially now making that human connection, that person to person contact, that one person you can help that shares a thank you.
Well, Amy, let's wrap up with a quote or a lyric or something that has really, maybe it's for you, a rock lyric. I'm interested to see what you select. As you've flipped your script, what is there something that you can leave with us that has helped you in your journey?
Yeah. And mine actually gets me through my life. Isn't even a musical one, but it's something that my mom taught me. And she told me, she goes, there's one person that controls your future. So don't look at it as, what do I do if something goes bad? But how do you handle it when something goes wrong?
Switching that if to when is such a mindset shift. I love it when moms have gems that people quote years later. Yeah. All of us moms love hearing that kids who are grown up still quote them. That's fantastic. Amy, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for really thinking about how you can help others with the experience you've been on.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Kristi. I just always enjoy talking with you, and this has been an honor to be on your podcast today.
And we're cheering for the event. We're cheering for Pete's health and grateful that things are where they are and you're able to have the capacity to go out there and to make a difference for other people. Things that Amy's story really highlights for me are really focusing in on when something happens to you, how can you help other people? And look to where your passion is. Look to where you find joy, because then, as she said, when you wake up in the morning, it won't feel like work. My hope is Amy's story empowers you to believe you're capable of more than you think, to discover motivation, to uncover inspiration, and to find the strength to turn the page.
Thank you for listening to Flip Your Script, hosted by Kristi Piehl and produced by Media Minefield. If you like our message, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share our episodes with your family and friends. Do you or someone you know have a story about flipping your script? We'd love to share it. Contact us on our website, flipyourscriptpodcast.com. To stay up to date on all things Flip Your Script, make sure to follow host Kristi Piehl on social media. You can also check out the website for pictures, resources mentioned in the show, and other great episodes.